I'm Rebecca. I am from Kentucky, and I have very significant roots in Appalachia. My family goes way, way back in the mountains of Appalachia. And I'm going to be reading a poem today called Kentucky Floodwater that's very much inspired by both the roots of my family and my lived experience growing up in that region and in the bluegrass, so like the Lexington, Kentucky area. The poem was inspired by a couple of things. It's first rooted in this really intense emotion that I felt as a result of what I call multiple natural disasters. I would say the first natural disaster that inspired the poem would be the addiction that is very much rooted in the mountains in general, but became such a significant, painful event for my family and my friends and everybody that I knew whenever pills started to take over the region. So I call that a natural disaster. And of course, it became the heroin epidemic that everyone knows of now. So the second natural disaster is in that region, we started to have significant flooding as climate change took over. I started to see all of this news footage, and I was no longer living in Kentucky. And it brought forward all of these really intense, powerful emotions based on the place that I came from being flooded. So it's called the Bible Belt for a reason. There's a very significant cultural, rich heritage in Appalachia and in Kentucky. And one of the problems with that is there's a personification of the main deity that can feel like a betrayal. So the poem was inspired by this image that kept coming to me of the Christ figure. Basically, the assumption is that if you have that personal relationship with a deity, that deity should intervene. And the grief that was so innate to the experience of watching so many people struggle with addiction, die from addiction, or slowly die, or pieces of them that we loved so much disappear, it became very personal. It was inspired by emotion and then also by this image that was rooted in that emotion. This is Kentucky Floodwater. You said Christ's palms were nailed to a cross with heroin needles, but we all know Jesus ain't dead. I heard the Lord saith he wrote the addicts off when all the other outside folks stopped watching. Then all the rain came, but no ark. While we begged God to notice he'd consumed our neighborhood with floodwater that looked like gravy. Dogs licked owners' muddy, open hands while they cowered on rooftops closer to heaven than was ordinary as everyone tried not to drown. Lord, crucifixion is a death like sinking below water. We was already flooded, crowned by opioid needles deemed newsworthy until forgotten, until too expensive. Irrelevant, ain't we most days? Just hardly human heirlooms floating in floodwater.